Today's date is March 2nd in the year 2026. This is going to be a continuation of my podcast regarding predictions. Okay, now I've been doing this for years, but right now I'm doing it with a whole new audience over at solarseer.substack.com. In my previous prediction podcast, I talked about how I see the future, and a lot of these things started out in my mind 20 years ago, right? So I'm just going to go over some of those things, but start talking about additional things, right, that I haven't yet put out there like I am right now. And I really want to get a book out there to warn the future, because I've seen too many things, especially recently, come to manifestation. So I'll say at the beginning, it sure seems like they want to take over the Middle East. The number 2100 came to me a long time ago, like at least 10 years ago. And I've seen that as instrumental, not only in their foreign policy, but the way that certain ethnic people and Muslims are treated in the Western world, not just in the United States, but globally. So it seems like they have some sort of an agenda to destroy everything. And right now, as we see announcements that they want to then go after Turkey after Iran, which isn't over, it's just begun. This is part of a long-term agenda, right? So I'm going to continue to air these speculations regarding what's really going on, because one part of it is the prediction about, what's coming, and the other part of it is what's happening spiritually, what's happening multi-dimensionally. And the problem is, in the world of ufology, you have a lot of speakers out there that are super famous, and none of them have any content that are basically like opposing people being put in cages, like in the modern ufology movement. So it was a very, very long time ago that I saw a lot of these trending New Agers and trending figures in conspiracy theory as being manipulated by a dark force, a dark anti-human force that's using them, basically as Pied Pipers, as false prophets, as, in some cases, figureheads of their own agenda. And that would apply correctly, I believe, to Alex Jones. That he and others, they more or less are possessed figureheads of this white world order agenda, where they purport to be, freedom fighters and things like that, though they're actually bringing us the agenda. There's actually lots of people that are now waking up to evil and the idea of secret societies and the idea of Alex Jones being some sort of a plant. Now, that is then a gateway, I don't want to say drug, but a gateway idea to other ideas that they are working on behalf of some sort of an empire of evil, basically. An evil empire. Right? So that's what this is about. This is about an agenda to rule the earth, to get rid of certain human beings. And so we're going to be living under the nightmare of propaganda for a long, long time. Stefan Burns talked about a 7-year cycle, basically, of conflict that begins about now. So we're in 2026. We're talking about at least 7 years of intense Middle Eastern conflict up until, 2033. Other predictions that were made earlier on this substack that some people may not have heard because I added people later is that it seems like we're dealing with a 100-year cycle, where 100 years after what happened in Nazi Germany took place, we're dealing with like the same situation again, but this time it's pointed at Middle Eastern people, it's pointed at Arabs, and the type of punishment, the type of cruelty, the type of torture far exceeds what was done there. Okay? There are certain things that people are aware of on the internet, but a lot of other people in denial don't want to face the hard truth about what's happening with technology. But we're walking into a world quickly where they want someone's face, right, to access their computer, That's emerging. We're already seeing it with a whole lot of websites. And so ultimately, I feel like we're going to be dealing with a situation where a lot of people, when they have full control, will be forced outside of society. Certainly certain ethnic minorities, plus dissidents, but an ethnic dissident seems to be most at risk. So I'm very concerned. But I'm calm as I'm delivering this. So like 1984 had the party members and the non-party members, right? The people that lived outside of society, right? The people that were the prostitutes, the people that had to traffic themselves, the people that didn't have the right authorization, essentially the people that weren't part of the party. And through the recent health event, of which I did take the vaccine because I was pressured to by the person that I live with, right? But it was pressure. And it also had to deal with the fact that I was isolated from friends and people to talk the proper sense to me. And while that's going to offend certain people that I added this newsletter because they're not right-wingers, some of them are naturally going to have an ideology that I have to trust what they call the science, even if, the heads of those science agencies and whatnot are in bed with Donald Trump, are in bed with industrialists, are in bed with Amazon, are in bed with all these other major corporate tycoons, essentially. So people have been conditioned to go along with this and what's called the digital ID. And so out of people's compassion for others, which I have compassion, that's why I went along with it, a lot of people will continue to be manipulated by the government when there are certain health events. And so it's become normalized for the cell phone to be a tracking device, contact tracing, and for it to emerge as the ultimate identification, access pass, basically. Way to get in, way to access stores, while it's actually tracking everything that we do by nefarious organizations and governments currently engaged in a genocide, actually using artificial intelligence to kill the people of Palestine. Okay, that's what rules our social media feeds. That's what decides whether or not we get a date, according to Netanyahu just last month, that, hey, you can think you can criticize Israel? We'll be there when you look for a wife. So things are basically being announced at rapid speed that have validated a lot of things that I thought would manifest, right? So as far as the Middle East, and then we'll move forward, it seems like, as I mentioned in yesterday's video, that they're planning to nuke Iraq later. And I'm just guesstimating 2050 for a number of different reasons, although it could happen sooner. And I'm already seeing messaging from people that nuking is the way. Nuking is what they want. Killing a whole lot of olive-skinned tan people is really the only thing that seems to make a lot of modern Americans happy, unfortunately. In my experience, in my travels, I've come across way too many people that are in blind support of this system, and I happen to live in a region of the metro area where there are never, ever, 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 ever any protests or any get-togethers. So I actually have front row seats to a type of society when it falls to where people aren't talking to each other. They're talking to machines. They're talking to AI bots. They're ultimately talking to technology, which is against our species, right? It's become the new partner. It's become the new daddy. And what it's doing is it's preventing people from meeting other people because of a larger agenda. In order to exterminate us, we have to be divided. In order for people to be brainwashed, they can't ever come across information like mine. So the algorithm is working 24/7 to make sure that my spiritual teachings and ideas don't reach other people because there's an anti-community, anti-human agenda where they don't want information out there, where in the future, people will need books. Let's segue to that. They will need zines. And why do I say zines? Because they can be published cheaply, and I've been saying this for a long time. And years ago, I would warn about the future in which people would literally need to smuggle information on flash drives and books to various places because it would be banned on the internet. They will use, I believe, the disinformation, the racism that came out of the dark side of the conspiracy theory on legitimate journalists and journalism. And you better listen to me right now if you're a skeptic regarding some of the things that I've talked about, but I want to thank you for listening. You need to understand and learn something from what happened 10 years ago. How they cracked down on YouTube content that in many cases was truthful. They drove people into bankruptcy and ruin. They still are. And then they platform and boost the legitimate neo-Nazi shit, including speeches from Hitler. All right? I know what I'm talking about, and I'm very confident what I'm saying, and I need you to wake up. Whoever you are that's listening, I need you to have a heart and understand what's taking place here. They never went after the deep, dark extremist stuff. They used that as the excuse to get rid of the really important stuff, and don't act like the next wave isn't coming. So I think there's going to be lots of people in power in the media that will be seemingly on the left or not with the Trump support base, that we will see just like waging war against anything that seemed to be a conspiracy theory in the future to destroy all forms of free speech. And for me to have taken the vaccine and to have worn a mask because of my compassion for others, I think that my concerns are legitimate when I talk about having pain in my arms. So when I see that we're in a society that people will treat me with malice, right, because I'm talking about something legitimate, when I actually didn't protest it, I went along with it, right, we're clearly dealing with people that are programmed to have no compassion for people that have health problems. That's brainwashing. For people to be in such a deep trust of Operation Warp Speed, which was brought by Donald Trump, which he's proud of, right? And he's very proud of it. He's not just a little bit proud of it, he's very proud of it. And in some conversations seems to let it slip out that it was part of a military program. See, that's the problem that we have. People are not suspicious of Trump enough. So that's enough on that. Keeping this centered around predictions and futurism. And observations. Yeah, but there's many implications of what happened recently. How it wasn't, just about health, that it was more about surveillance, right? So it sure seems like my passing, whenever my passing is to occur on this planet, seems to be synchronized with, like, the downfall of America itself. And something even greater, like of humanity going through a massive transformation. It's representative, this time that we're in, of the death of free speech, the rise of surveillance, right? So in Iraq, I think about the future of 2050 and the idea that between now and then, many people could be deported to, say, specifically Iraq, as Iraq could be set up to be basically a prison. It might already be that way. But I'm talking more or less like in the future where people are just like dropped into Iraq. I also suspect that they'll be deporting people, possibly using robots in 10 years. Something that I wrote about when I was 16, actually, in 1996 in Springfield, Virginia. But they have islands out there, not just Epstein's island, but other billionaires have islands. Then there's islands that the military uses. Without getting graphic, there's an evil basically that's been activated, that's alive, that the New Age movement didn't warn you about, that's going to be harming humans in different capacities around the world, possibly on some of these islands. Might already be doing that. They would have the ability to cover something up. The fact that there would ever be any real, like, expose on what's really going on these black sites is a farce. There are black sites. There are mystery sites that nobody knows about, that evil people within the government which is compartmentalized, have access to. So that's my concern. But as far as karma goes, it is only just that people that killed, that raped, that were a part of this current system of oppression, that when they go, that they will be reborn in Iraq in 2050. Okay? Okay, cryptocurrency.